10,500 or so BC, which is in fact the end of the last ice age. He tied them with Atlantis, or at least survivors of Atlantis. He also suggested, Edgar Cayce suggested in one of his trance states, he got this information. He's really one of the great psychics, of course, of American 20th century. And he suggested, or he relayed information that there was a hall of records, Atlantean records, somewhere in the vicinity of the Sphinx. I actually did not know this. At least I had put it out of my mind, if I did know it at the time, in the early 1990s. A fellow geophysicist named Thomas DeBecke and myself did seismic studies around the base of the Great Sphinx. What I was looking for was more independent, corroborative evidence to confirm my dating of the Sphinx, which in fact further time. I wanted to look at subsurface data for mineralogical changes that I could use to help date the Sphinx. And we collected a lot of data. It was very successful. It confirmed my earlier scenario, my hypothesis. It confirmed my hypothesis based on other data that the Sphinx goes back much earlier. And this has withstood the test of time for the last 20 plus years, and we've got more data to support that. But when we were doing that seismic work, we found, lo and behold, a chamber on the left paw of the Sphinx. A fairly large chamber, 5 to 12 meters on a side or so. And at that point, I somehow wasn't really aware of Edgar Cayce's specific predictions about a chamber in the vicinity of the Sphinx. I got a call from my office. I was in my office at Boston University. I got a call from the office of the ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, essentially the Edgar Cayce Foundation down in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and they had heard about my work. I published. I was not, hiding the work, and they wanted to know about this chamber, and they informed me, well, yes, Edgar Cayce had prophesied, had predicted that there should be a chamber there. Now, when I start looking into it, he says it's a little ambiguous exactly the way he said it. He talks about the right paw of the Sphinx, if I remember correctly, but if you face the Sphinx, it is the right paw, it's on the right side. So I wonder if he was thinking in those terms, because if you put it in context, he's sort of saying, well, when you view the Sphinx, and he talks about from the Nile and the shadows. So we may have even gotten the correct paw. Or got the correct paw. So I don't know what to make of this. I mean,
I noticed when they tried to disprove, they didn't say it was your theory, but when they tried to disprove it, it seems like they drilled down at an angle that would probably have never hit the chamber.
Absolutely did. That's very perceptive to you. You can see it somewhere. I've seen it on YouTube. You've got Mark Lehner and Zai Hawass. I think this is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
They're standing by the paw. They're standing by the left paw. They're drilling down at an angle which is sort of guaranteed not to hit it. Because, they missed it.
Where would you like to go from here? What would you like to cover?
Something that Katie just reminded me about is, I don't know if this is worthwhile getting into, but we're talking about the Yuga cycle. We were talking successional ages and changing cycle. Right now, we are at the end, of course, of the age of Pisces and going to age of Aquarius, and that traditionally indicates a change in mentality from more belief-oriented, religious-oriented belief system to more what I would say maybe understanding, trying to search for the actual answers.
Right.
Well,
and it's interesting, too, that if you interpret the Bible correctly, it says that Jesus will be here till the end of the world, but actually the Hebrew word is end of the ages.
Exactly. And so I think right now we are going through that transition from Pisces to Aquarius, which just really means a different way of thinking about things, a different consciousness, a different approach. Yeah. And some people argue about, well, when is the age of Aquarius going to occur? But I think I personally think we're in that transition right now, that we're already starting to see that transition.
Yeah, it's not going to happen at 12 noon on a certain date. You know, it's organic in so many ways, and it's hard to say when a flower starts being a flower because it's a
Oh yeah,
gradual process.
exactly, exactly.
So let me see here, Robert. I had a few things I was going to ask you about here.
Anything you like.
Okay, yeah, we got talking about all kinds of things. You know, I think one of the things that'd be interesting to cover is, and this is something that's sort of I've noticed on a personal level, is
Mm-hmm.
the more balanced I can become inside myself as a man, balanced with my feminine energy, it,
Mm-hmm.
the more it clears things up. It's almost like brings things into focus, and it changes how I react and deal with the world. Like as a man with male energy, I would deal with the world like that, just a
Yeah,
solid thump. But with
yeah,
feminine energy, I deal with it more like a gentle push.
yeah.
And I've noticed that being married and being in
Mm-hmm.
love, I've noticed her energy when it comes at me. I don't notice that it's done its thing until it's over. It's not conflictive. It's not combative. It's
Yeah.
it's like a gentle transformation of whatever it is we're dealing with.
Mhm.
Does that make sense to you?
That makes sense to me, and I wonder. I'm thinking as you say that, as we go through this hopefully transition, uh, you know, consciousness transition as a collective group, that maybe we're going from less that combative, male, assertive, dominant force to more cooperation. Again, I think that ties in with the concept of the oneness of the unity. Uh,
Yeah.
and I don't know, maybe in our society it's been more traditional that males are these strong, self-centered, egotistical individuals versus it's been considered more feminine to be cooperative, to be sharing, to work together. I mean, I hate to stereotype too much, but I do see us collectively going more toward that balance. Or I hope we're going toward that
Yeah,
balance.
one of the things I bring up in my book, I have a whole chapter on women, and I think two things that's been overlooked by the patriarchal organizations
Yeah.
are women.
Hmm.
Wait till women start waking up and realizing they have power, and the
Yeah.
internet. The internet. This is why they want to control it so much. They want to grab hold of the internet because this is how we're going to communicate about these ideas, and they're powerful. Once you have an idea that it's time, and it's starting to shift. I can feel it inside myself, and I remember back. I'm sure you do. You remember when you first started learning how to ride a bike? How
Oh,
difficult it was
yeah. Yeah.
because you were doing it with your left brain. You were thinking, "Oh, I'm falling to the left, so I got to pull it to the right," and
Yeah,
it
exactly.
was like awkward, and you fall and fall. But there comes a magical moment of transference and coherence when your body mind takes over, and
Right.
all of a sudden you realize that you're not only not falling, you can't. You
That,
can't make yourself fall anymore. Something
yeah,
has taken over on a new level of consciousness.
right. Right. And actually, as you were saying, I was thinking that when you're first learning, you're thinking about so consciously, so rationally,
Right?
and trying to think every little thing through. And that's when you mess up. That's when you make the mistakes. That's when you falter. Versus if once it's ingrained, once it's fluid, then in a sense you can't.
Yeah, and I think this is where the scientific community has become a little bit dogmatized too, because I think we're getting into realms where religion used to have control of that realm. These
Right.
real subtle energies, these spiritual realms and consciousness used to be the C word in science. You didn't even say it. But now it's becoming the focus of a lot of scientific investigation. So
Yeah.
I think this balance is coming into play and will eventually probably braid religion and science together in such a way that it will become a new creature of research.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that day. I'm hoping that will be the case. And actually, going back in time, again, I'm very interested in the ancient cultures, the ancient civilizations, and I believe that they had a different approach, a different way that we can learn from. And traditionally, I believe there was not this dichotomy between science and religion. In fact, we talk about, for instance, I'll call him the Egyptologist. He did a lot of work in Egypt. Schwaller de Lubitsch, he talks about the sacred science, whereas for me, when I was being trained as a classical academic scientist, to talk about sacred and science, I mean, you didn't even combine those two concepts. I mean, that they were antithetical versus this whole concept of combining them. I think is really what we need and what we had in previous world ages, and really different mental apparatus, a different approach to it, which we need to regain.
Yeah, I'm going to take us probably way off the track here for a second, but something that's interested me lately, and this started with a few trips to Bolivia and Brazil. I took ayahuasca, took that journey using plants, Then I remember in a conversation with Fred Allen Wolf, he talked about the fact that was the main source of him going from a rigid quantum physicist into these other realms, is because it opened up some doors of vision. And lately I've been listening to Graham Hancock and Terence McKenna. I mean, Graham Hancock, it's changed his whole outlook of what life and reality is about. And it seems to me that my few experiences with ayahuasca took me and put me in touch with the mother nature, the organic nature, and I realized at that point that the world, it seems like we've lost touch with the mother nature of Gaia, the world as a living organism, and it appears like we've not only made shamans illegal, you can actually go to prison for doing some of the things that shamans do, where ancient cultures, they were revered, and the culture, the tribe, totally depended on shamans taking sort of some of these plants, whether they were mushrooms or ayahuasca, and going into these other realms and bringing back new information for their evolution in creating their societies and even medicine. What do you feel about that?
Well, okay, there's two comments. I actually have become very interested in shamanism and have been looking into it on many levels. I've actually been looking at, most recently, a lot of the ethnographic literature, for instance, and talking to people and trying to experience things. Just as a side note, I mean, I'm an academic. I almost feel like I'm so much of an academic, but I actually have a degree in anthropology, among other things, at undergraduate level. So this is not something that's new, sort of a new interest for me. But I have great respect for shamanism, and it does seem to be a tradition that goes way back. What I was going to say is that the classic shamanism, at least where we've derived that term from now, is from really the Tungus region, the Siberian, Mongolian, China, that region. And it's very interesting that a lot of those shaman experiences were actually done, and it's a little bit more difficult to do perhaps, but done without any kind of plants or any kind of intoxication in the sense of ingesting something or taking something in. In fact, they were done in many cases totally by will and consciousness, and things like attuning to the earth itself, something that I've become very interested in is Schumann resonances, for instance. And I believe a lot of the shamans traditionally, they were able to attune themselves to the Schumann resonances, which is sometimes referred to as the heartbeat of Earth. And actually, I think that, and I don't want to go off on too many tangents here, but for instance, some telepathic experiences, some shamanistic type of experiences are actually, again, I'm an academic, I'm a geophysicist, among other things, are actually carried on Schumann